Hello, everyone. Joining me today as we continue our interview series with the members of Crime Writers of Canada who have been shortlisted for the Awards of Excellence is Mary Jane Maffini. Hi, Mary Jane. How are you today?
Great, Eric. How are you?
I'm good too. Well, let's start with a short. I tried to make it short, but your bio is very long. Mary Jane Maffini is a lapsed librarian, a member of the Ladies Killing Circle, former co-owner of Ottawa's prime crime mysteries bookstore. Mary Jane is a former president of Crime Writers of Canada and a former board of directors member of the Canadian Booksellers Association. Her books of short stories have won many awards, including 3 Arthur Ellis Awards, and in 2006, she received the Derrick Murdoch Award. She writes the Fiona Silk series, the Charlotte Adams series, the Camilla MacPhee series. With her daughter, Victoria, she writes under the pen name Victoria Abbott, and together they write the Book Collector Mystery Series. We're going to focus mostly on Charlotte Adams because you wrote that first book of the series, Organize Your Corpse, in 2007. You wrote the next 4 books 1 year apart. The 5th book in the series, The Busy Woman's Guide to Murder, won the RT Award for Amateur Sleuth in 2012. And then you stopped. So you waited almost 10 years to revisit Charlotte. And I was wondering, what was the inspiration to revisiting her and writing about her in Death Plans a Perfect Trip?
Oh, good question. Well, after the 5th Charlotte book came out, and Berkeley, there was Berkeley Prime Crime, the mass market paperbacks, and they took 3, and then they took 2 more, and then a lot of series don't go on past that. So this one didn't. But I was ready to go on with it. I really liked Charlotte, and eventually I got my rights back to the series, and it was reissued, and I was ready to go with the 6th one. But in the interim, I was writing that Book Collectors Mystery Series with my daughter, so we were busy. But I missed Charlotte. She is a person that I learned a lot from because I'm a bit chaotic and messy, and she's a little bit get it done right. And so it also meant that all my organizing books and papers and things that were stacked around were now tax deductions. How great is that? But I missed her viewpoint, and I missed her wardrobe. And because I had enjoyed her so much, I had liked the character. I had a very lively backstory for her, but most of it wasn't really released onto the page. I mean, we don't want to info dump our readers. But I knew that very bad things had happened to her when she was a child. Now, this is a fairly cozy series, it's Amateur Sleuth, but things had happened, and they had shaped her and her need for stability and order, and they had shaped her mother, who was a thriller writer and not someone you might necessarily want as your mother. So in book 6, I was able to harvest these things. Plus, I had a big birthday, and we were traveling to Europe. And we went to we went to Paris, we went to Lisbon, we went to Piedmont in Italy, and we went to Cinque Terre. All these places are fabulous, but they have their hints of danger in them. Things can go wrong. There are alleys, there are cliffs, there are strange places that people can leap out of the shadows. So I thought, well, Charlotte should really experience both sides of a trip like that. So she is searching for her missing mother. I had wanted the mother to go missing for quite a long time, but now I really got to go. So what is going on? And she's over in Europe. Her love interest, the very, very nice Jack O'Reilly, is with her. And they're desperately searching. She knows that something is extremely wrong. In the course of this search, she engages people who might know, including a librarian at McGill University, to do some research into history. And we find out what events actually led to Charlotte and her mother hiding out, changing their names, and living in Woodbridge, New York. And it turns out that those long ago events, 25 years earlier, are still, the people behind them are still very much alive and mad as hell. So it was so much fun to write. And I don't think I've finished with Charlotte yet, but Death Plans a Perfect Trip, which includes packing tips, how to do something else for the reader, was really fun for me to write. And I'm really glad that it's getting some positive stuff.
Now that you're sort of revisiting some of your characters, is there any other series that you're thinking of looking at again?
Well, I have a new Camilla MacPhee book out. It had been a long time since there had
Yep.
been a Camilla MacPhee book. And here, I'll show it. You light up my desk, the seventh Camilla MacPhee book. And Camilla is a Canadian, it's a Canadian series, and she's an Ottawa-based lawyer. She's kind of, let's say you don't want to get her on her bad side. And she's fun to write. And I feel we get very invested in our characters. We like them, maybe not as much as our children, but they're in the running. And so I had given her a break, mainly because I was busy with other things, but I had given her a break and let her cohabit with her police officer partner, Sergeant Ray DeVoe, and let her rethink her life. She's turning 50, and that was fine. But I felt there's a lot of Camilla's story left to take, and I thought it would be fun to take her back to Cape Breton and see all the dangers that lurk on the Cabot Trail. So poor Camilla and Ray, they're trying to elope on the Cabot Trail, and if anybody's been on the Cabot Trail, it's full of fantastic cliffs, boulders that can fall down, lots of woods, rocks on the beach, and that was great too. And sometimes hurricanes. So all that stuff can happen. And Camilla cannot just be allowed to go quietly get married on a beach without a lot of stuff to deal with. I enjoyed writing the book tremendously, and people seem to enjoy reading it too.
You've touched on this a bit. You've had several series, I guess, and some of them you've set in Canada, some in the US. Myself, being sort of a new to the industry, one advice we get a lot of is don't set your stories in Canada, set them in the US, because Americans only want to read US stories. Now that you've written both, do you feel that's true advice, or should we really write our stories where we want to?
I think we should write the books we want to write. And with my, I had written 2 Canadian series, pitched them to the editor in New York, who I actually had met at conferences, and he was never able to get them through the marketing committee. And the idea was, the sales, I think, by and large, of Canadian settings may be a little bit less than they are of American settings. I don't know if it's true, but the perception is there. So he did say, I'll buy a series from you someday, and I made sure that happened. However, I enjoyed writing the American books. They were not, they were books about, Charlotte Adams. That's really about her occupation as an organizer. She's an organizer, and that's what she brings to solving mysteries, that her point of view and the skills that she has. She could be almost anywhere. It's not, I put her in a community, and I tried to make the community realistic. But American books and Canadian books are very different. There's not, I would never drop any politics into an American book. There's very little, well, there's a little bit more now sex in an American book, and it's just really no sex in any of my books. But anyway, I could do it if I wanted to. So here, there's no mention of people who don't go to church. In American, it's just the cozy world, and we're talking about cozies now. The cozy world is more prescribed there. I loved writing those books, and I loved writing with my daughter the book collector mysteries. But I'm at home in Canada. Canada's my home, and I know I feel comfortable with what I say. Not everybody likes Camilla's politics and her attitudes, but Canada is a very accepting country about politics and attitudes. Maybe not as much as it used to be, but we can actually step out on the ledge a little bit more, and we can spell things with U's in them. That's another good thing, neighbor and honor and color. So I like that. I felt comfortable with the spellings too. So if I could only do one, if the time was rolled back, I think I would write the Canadian books. I could only do one. The American market can be better for us, and we could sell more books because it's a huge country, and Americans have been great readers, and I have enjoyed meeting them. So I would say find the book that you want to write, and set it where it has to be. I know many excellent Canadian writers have just set theirs just south of the border, because they're maybe about a family drama, or it's a thriller, it doesn't have to be in any particular country. It's the small scale, big action thing. So, but with cozies and amateur sleuth, the world that you're talking about, that you're showing the reader, that world has to seem real, and it's easier to make it seem real if it's the world you live in, actually.
When we're talking cozies, one of, I think the hardest thing to do, and it's a silly question maybe, but coming up with titles is so hard for cozies. There's only so many things death can do, right? So Death Planned a Perfect Trip, and then you go onto Google and you're like, oh, 3 people have used that already. Do you struggle with your titles, or do they come to you quite easily?
They just come to me. Often I have pages of titles in a file called titles ? And so they have all come with, the only one that I had been struggling with is what will be the next Charlotte Adams mystery, which is a bit behind schedule, but is going to come together, which is about a renovation. And I got distracted by writing some other stuff. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. So I have finally come up with Reno Mortis. And, I actually could hear my editor yawning on the phone, and I told him this, but when I tell people about it in workshops or when we're out doing talks, they seem to really like it. So I'm gonna double it. But that was honestly the only book that I ever struggled with a title. However, Little Boy Blues, which is my 3rd book, you're right. If you go on to Amazon, you're going to find 5 or 6 of them, and mine's going to be number 7 there. So it is good to do the homework first. And Death Runs Out of Ideas. There's a good title for you.
You said you got distracted writing other stuff. Is that something you've said a lot in your life?
Oh, I'm very distracted. Anyway, I've been writing some plays. And so it's so very different. And I was just, somebody asked me to write a play, but I had wanted to write plays too. So I wrote that one and took a play course and have written 2 plays this year. And then one of the plays was performed. And I was involved in that production. So that took a lot of time. And it's really very different from writing narrative fiction or writing genre fiction. It's totally different. But I think when you try something new, you get excited about it, that excitement carries back to whatever you were doing in the first place. So I'm really happy that I've done that. But it is time for me to keep my bum in the seat and finish Reno Mortis.
As I mentioned earlier, you were the past president of Writers of Canada, and we were just celebrating our 40th anniversary last year. You were president during 2001, 2003, so you would have been around for the 20th anniversary. What was the organization like back then?
It was kind of coming into its own. When I first joined in the 90s, I wasn't allowed to join because I didn't have any books. So once I had a couple of short stories, I was allowed to join. It was, I don't want to say it was an old boys club, but there were a lot of boys. And some of them were old, and many of them were very nice, but it was not the type of organization that it is now, because people had known each other for years. They're often very helpful, had fantastic ideas. People like Peter Sellers, who came up with short story series, and is still doing the French translations, arranging for the French translations of the Primaries of Canada short story winners, right? So, but we were kind of strangers in a strange place. When I say we, I say several of the members of the Ladies Killing Circle. We didn't have books yet. And so by the early 2000s, the gender balance was starting to shift a little bit, but also I would say Primaries of Canada used to be primarily Toronto and the West Coast, because you had L.R. Wright, and you had Bill Deverell, and you had Nora Kelly, and a number of presidents of the organization there. And I'm leaving somebody important out, but it'll come to me. So, but there wasn't so much in between. I mean, there would be prairie writers, but not like there are now. But that was genesis for that. Really, by the 2000s, a number of smaller presses. I'm thinking of New West, and I'm thinking, I don't think Touchstone was there at that time, but it's certainly done fabulous work since. And Rendezvous in Toronto. they were coming along, and there were more opportunities for people who wrote the kind of books I like to write and like to read too. So, and then there was a bit more action on the East Coast. So that it really was becoming a very exciting time. And also the media was changing too. We were a little bit before social media, but or as we know it now. But people were being brought in. The people who were in the kind of the hinterland, like Ottawa, were beginning to have a voice. And then that kind of tied in with the start of Bloody Words. And so there was a big overlap with the Bloody Words Conference and people who were involved with Crime Writers of Canada. And so you could just kind of feel the ferment and the action. And we started to have events at the big conferences. Now we haven't had big conferences for a couple of years for the P word, but that started to make a difference to get people, libraries interested in what people were doing. And also the newsletter started to come out with the cool Canadian crime, things like this. So it was a great time to be part of the organization, but it has always been a great time to be part of Crime Writers of Canada. I don't think people realize how important that has been to the writing and reading community. I'm so glad that the organization remains strong and vital and changing, because the organizations have to change to meet whatever the demands of the times are.
You've sort of already answered this question, but if you have any 2 more cents left in you, I'll ask, what do you think of the Canadian crime mystery scene right now? You've already spoken to it a bit, but as we're trying to approach a global market, and you've just been traveling in Europe, do you feel there is a Canadian crime scene on global scale, or are we not there yet?
I don't know the answer to it. I know it's here, and I know my first choice is often in what I'm going to read, not from any sense of obligation, but because I want to, is the Canadian book. So for instance, this is the list that I'm on. I've read everything that Anne Emery's written, everything that Iona Wishaw has written, everything that Thomas King has written, and I've just discovered Irene Vienna, I believe is her name, and I'm going to read her stuff too. So when I'm reading books, like I read Lynn Wood, and I'm just trying to think of who else I'm leaving out. Now that I could be in big trouble.
You're gonna be in trouble, yes. There's a fellow Ottawa writer I'm thinking of.
Sorry?
There's a fellow Ottawa writer I can think of.
Yeah, there's Barbara Franken, and there's Vicki Delaney, and there's Robin Harlick, and there's so many people. And but I'm just thinking of Tony Bedolka and Going to Beautiful. What a fantastic book that was. And I bought that to give away too. I mean, I read it and bought another one to give away. So it's a very exciting time to be a reader of Canadian fiction, which almost all the writers are too. And so I don't know how that carries overseas. You know, the availability of books through Amazon and other online services, I think, is going to serve us well. I don't think we're where we should be. And that's just I think it's because little tiny Canada, actually. You got your big UK and your big US, but I think we really deserve to be we got the cream of the crop here, and so I know it when I'm making my Christmases for sure.
That's great, Mary Jane. Thank you so much, because I completely concur with you. I at this point only read Canadian mysteries, and my to read list is just so full. Plus, I got to catch up with everybody's backlog story.
Right. Yes, exactly. We should always write our books so that the latest one can be read as a standalone and never reveal anything what happened at the end.
It's a tough task.
It's a tough task, right?
Well, we're going to have to wait till May 25th to see if you can win your 4th award. Do you know how many Peter Robinson won? You're probably in contention soon for
Oh, am I? Might have been for short stories. Well, he had them for short. One year he won for both, and if he'd had anything else, he would have won for that too. That was an exciting year. He wasn't at the awards, but he did win. But he just scooped them, and deservedly so.
Perfect. So I'm going to have to ask somebody, maybe Levika knows who has the most. And
yes,
you'll be in contention.
I probably could let my fingers through the wall, because they're all listed on the website. You can go through if somebody needs a little hobby. Right? But
Somebody
he was
needs a
right
hobby.
up there, right?
Yes. Perfect. So it was a pleasure talking to Mary Jane, and good luck on May 25th.
Thank you. Always nice to talk to you, Eric. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.